Drunk mind speaks sober thoughts, right? Am I a feminist? Maybe. So, the reason why I ask that is because lately I've been consuming a lot of content from within what they call the Manosphere, right? Passport bros, men going their own way, save yourself, black man. A lot of that is made by and for specifically black men, right? In regards to how we're treated or how we perceive our value within the confines of a romantic relationship. And as I'm consuming this content, time and time again, the enemy, so to speak, is presented as the feminist movement. The feminist movement is why this and that, and it's bad, and we should fight against it, yada, yada, yada. But just a few years ago, I was marching alongside a women's rights demonstration myself as a feminist, or at least calling myself that according to my best understanding of what the term means. Do I believe women should have equal rights as far as pursuing whatever pursuits they so desire? Of course. Do I think if I and an equally qualified woman are working the same job, we should have access to the same pay scale? Certainly. I mean, what logical reason could I have to be against equality in terms of a human being's ability to ascend financially, socially, you know? In that regard, certainly, I am a feminist. A lot of these movements through which I've been consuming content have painted feminism as something very different, something nefarious even. Though I don't believe I'm myself entirely qualified to say what feminism is or is not, I can say I never understood it to be that. By that I mean the treatment that specifically black men in America have become accustomed to receiving from black women in America. Us being told we don't matter in so many words. Is that feminism? I mean, I don't think so. I've looked at some basic definitions of the term. I spent a lifetime really genuinely listening to women on the subject. I'd never claimed to be an expert, but I've heard some things that seem perfectly valid to me. I understand that at a point in time in our history, for a long time in our history rather, women didn't have the right to vote or conduct business transactions without a male to speak on their behalf. Reproductive rights were entirely limited. I don't agree with those things. I don't want those things to be a reality in the world I live in. I've never presumed to have any say over whether or not a woman should give birth. I don't presume to have any authority, rather, over what a woman should get paid for whatever work she does, or whether or not a woman, regardless of my connection to her, should be able to transact business in any particular regard. I don't believe it's my place to assert dominance in those areas. I've been in relationships where both I and my significant other go out and work, and in the home we largely share the household tasks or chores. I'm not great at picking up my clothes after I take them off. I get home after a hard day's work, and I've heard that. And though I've been frustrated sometimes, there have been arguments, I've never felt like a woman asserting to me that I should do more, or rather carry my own weight with regards to the household tasks in a relationship dynamic where we're both working. I've never accused her of making invalid points if those were the points she was making. I've also been in a relationship where I was the sole breadwinner. I go out, I bring home the bacon, I protect the household, and she was expected to keep the place clean, cook the food, so on and so forth. In my particular situation, that didn't happen. I did bring home the bacon and I did keep the house safe, but still kind of had to, chip in on the household duties more than I would have liked to. And I don't believe me wanting a more traditional relationship dynamic in that regard necessarily goes against feminism. I wouldn't try to impose that type of lifestyle on a woman who expressed to me that that wasn't what she wanted. I'd rather maybe either compromise or perhaps choose a partner that, like myself, is in search of a more traditional relationship dynamic. But none of that has anything to do, at least as far as I'm concerned, with whether or not she and I have equal rights in society. And I have been vocal about my displeasure with concepts like hot girl summer and pro-promiscuity among women, and the kind of this echo chamber that what a lot of people call modern women seem to have, in which they encourage each other not to take accountability for mistakes they've made. To my understanding, though, none of that is feminism. I call it ratchetness. Maybe my terms are a little outdated, but I don't think the term ratchetness is nearly as old as the term feminism. The whole city girl movement has been largely driven by pop culture. To me, doesn't ring feminism. I suppose I assumed it was something different, something that perhaps is nefarious. A lot of people have related it to feminism, particularly those in the Manosphere slash red pill slash, you know, SYSBM. All these movements seem to attribute those things to feminism. And I don't know if I agree with that. While I do think something needs to be done about rampant ratchetness, or, you know, let's call a spade, misandry in the black community, I don't think I agree that that is to be attributed to the feminist movement. I think I can speak out against the mistreatment and hatred of black men coming from black women and still myself be a feminist. Now, I'm being careful about how I word things because, again, I don't believe I'm qualified to say what feminism is or is not. But I do know a few things. I'm familiar with the parallels and the clashes between the feminist movement and the civil rights movements for blacks. Perhaps the biggest parallel is both movements assert that no one in America has the rights, the privileges, and the opportunities of cis, straight, white males. And I believe among American whites, if you'll pardon the term, there is a patriarchy that is indeed very oppressive, systematically so. Not just against blacks, but against the LGBTQ community and women of all races. I believe that to be the case. Within the black community, however, I don't know if it's exactly the same. I know racism is an act. Racism itself is not an ideology. White supremacy is an ideology. Racism is an act. And in order to perform the act of racism, the component of advantage is required. Which is why black people cannot be racist, because we don't have any advantage with which to perform the act of racism. Now, I've heard some say, if you're not a feminist, you're a sexist. Can sexism be carried out as an act without the component of advantage? I don't know. But if the term is indeed a parallel to racism, then one would surmise that sexism is an act that, in order to be carried out, requires a component of advantage. And do black men, societally speaking, actually have any real advantage over black women? Probably not. I mean, I don't think so. So can we carry out the act of sexism? I don't know. I would argue that within the black community, at least below a certain income level, that our family units are largely matriarchal. which would mean that within the black community, women actually have the advantage. If I'm going to draw a parallel between sexism and racism, I suppose the same parallel could be applied between white supremacy and misogyny, those being the ideologies that drive the acts of racism and sexism, respectively. And I do struggle with that because as a black man, I understand fully how systematic racism is a real thing. It affects me every day, even as a black man who has done reasonably well for himself. And a good friend of mine once told me that even if I myself don't consciously harbor misogynistic viewpoints, simply by virtue of the fact that as a man I benefit from institutionalized sexism, that's a problem. And I can see that. But I'm getting off point. Am I a feminist? Well, I would say yes. Do I think a lot of these movements that are aimed at getting black men to stop settling for the shaming tactics, the insults, the guilt tripping, the needing to be right, the manipulative culture that's been established in black America with regards to how women view and treat men, I feel like I can still fight against that and be a feminist. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. No, I don't think they are. Because when I'm watching these videos, I'm all for it. You know what I'm saying? I'm watching this content creator or that content creator. They're telling us to not settle or move abroad, and or one way or another just stop chasing ass and start chasing value as black men with regards to how we pursue relationships. I agree with them almost exclusively until they start saying, see, this is what the feminist movement has done to us, and feminism this and feminism that. Once they get to that point, I get a little sour taste in my mouth. Like, I don't think what we're fighting against is feminism. To my understanding, I don't think feminism is at all a bad thing. I think the habits that have been formed over the last several decades in the black community that lend to black women seemingly not even viewing black men as human beings, I think that is a problem. But I don't think necessarily that that has any real relation to feminism. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the matter. Cheers.